Welcome back, everybody. It's Friday, December 26th, 2025. Born on this date in 1954, the Wizard of Oz, Baseball Hall of Famer Ozzie Smith of Mobile. Do y'all remember This Week in Baseball during the Mel Allen years? You would always watch that to look forward to the defensive highlights of the week just to see what Ozzie Smith did. He'd always get one of Mel Allen's. How about that lines? Today we have a different kind of report for you. No roundup at the top because the whole episode is a big roundup of news from throughout the year. Investigative editor Ashley Remkus will join us after the sponsor break to talk about stories that made a difference in 2025. We're going to cut it off at 10 because we can't go on forever, but she lays them out pretty good for you. I'm going to leave some links to the stories so you can go deeper if one of the topics is something you want to take a deeper dive on, but Ashley will break them down here pretty good for us. So let me mention also that this was recorded a few days early when it was still really cold before it became really warm. So you'll have to suspend some disbelief when we talk about it being bone chilling. We're not out of our minds, at least not because we say that it's bone chilling. Hey, it's a good review and an update on a lot of Alabama news. So y'all stay with us. I'm Ike Morgan and we're down in Alabama.
Meet the computer you can talk to. With Copilot on Windows, working, creating, and collaborating is as easy as talking. Got writer's block? Share your screen with Copilot Vision to help spark inspiration. And use Copilot Voice to have a conversation and brainstorm ideas. Or maybe you need some tech help. With Copilot Vision, Copilot sees what you see. Let Copilot talk you through step-by-step guidance so you can master new apps, games, and skills faster. Try now at windows.com/Copilot.
Hey, thanks everybody out there for staying with us. You know, a lot of times I'll have journalists on a second segment of Down in Alabama and point out that the audience has heard me frequently call out their bylines. That's no, by the way, that's no knock on reporters and editors who aren't necessarily called out a lot and have different kinds of jobs. Some beats are just more applicable to this particular audience than others. A frequent contributor who you haven't heard me mention as much the last couple of years is Ashley Remkus. That's because she is now the investigative editor at AL.com. And she's right here at Down in Alabama Studios to talk about some of her favorite investigative stories that have been done in 2025. Ashley, thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks, Ike. It's really great to be back on your show.
I would love to have you back, and I enjoyed your contributions, both that I would just steal and that you would occasionally send me a clip of.
It's very different being in the editor chair, but it's still fun and rewarding, and obviously can't complain about having the chance to work with reporters on stories that make a difference in the state that I love and that I call home.
What I love about your team, your sphere of influence, is that it's not just a siloed off department. You know, that had become a problem with old newsrooms of years way in the past. Can you tell us a little bit about how y'all make use of our statewide newsroom to pull off some of the capital J news, capital J journalism?
We actually don't have a traditional investigative team in the way that we have even in recent years. The way we think about ourselves is AL.com is an investigative newsroom. Investigations can come from anyone. It can be from someone on a local team. It might be someone that covers a statewide issue or even politics. And as I think we're going to get into here, even in sports, we can do investigative reporting.
Yeah, as a former sports editor, let me say, we do investigative work too.
Absolutely. And I got to tell you, it's some of my favorite. I feel like if you could write the dream job for me, it would be an investigative sports editor.
Oh, I think so. Well, and after this year, maybe so. Maybe they'll work that out. I know you have plenty on your plate. Last year, I'll call him your predecessor in this position. I don't know if it's the exact same title. From my little corner's perspective, your predecessor, Challen Stevens, came on this podcast to talk about the stories that made a difference in 2024. So Challen now, I think his title is King of the World. I'm not sure. Maybe Universe. I don't know what it is.
Officially boss man, as far as I'm concerned. He's our big boss,
Big
I love to be his successor.
And we need to get him back on down in Alabama, and the Big Boss Man could be his walk-up music.
I would love that. I'm not sure if he would, but I think you and me and the audience would love that very much.
Last year, he came on the podcast to talk about stories that made a difference in 24. So I've asked you to come on and do that in 25. Ashley sent me a list of stories that she'll talk about. She knows a lot more about them than I do, so I'm using her list as notes for this interview. If she publishes that list on the internet before this podcast goes live, I'll link to it in show notes. So y'all can find something there to get you to some of these stories. Actually, one thing y'all do really well is take a story that's national in scope and localize it, or I guess stateize it, right? Early in the year, everybody nationally, because everybody loves politics now. Everybody's into politics. They're debating the Department of Government efficiency. And I say let them fight over whether they love Elon or hate Elon, or love Trump or hate Trump. We had lots of stories about what actually might happen in Alabama in the event of major cuts to federal programs. Can you tell me some about that reporting?
Absolutely. It's really hard almost to put yourself back in the mindset of that February of 2025 stage, sort of where we were in national politics. But at the time, we were hearing a lot about what these cuts might mean for the University of Alabama at Birmingham. As we know, UAB is a research school, and realistically, UAB and the work that they do there is sort of the heart of downtown Birmingham. So John Archibald made calls and chased down information about what those cuts would look like at UAB. And on a Saturday night, as you and I both know, the news does not only happen between 9 and 5, Monday to Friday. On a Saturday night, John Archibald broke news about cuts for NIH research grants at UAB. And John's reporting is what prompted Senator Katie Britt for the first time to question DOGE and its methods. And after that, we saw John called to go on national news, talk on MSNBC, on TV. And then from there, we saw the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal pick up on Birmingham as a place that they could base some of their reporting in, citing it as an example and linking back to the work that John did for us on AL.com.
Yeah, and we saw that debates just completely grow out of that. We saw several reporters in the newsroom work on related stories, whether it was UAB or some of the food stamp stories at the time.
Absolutely. This is just one example of the sorts of reporting that we were doing around all these changes at the federal level and looking at what it would mean here in Alabama. These are the kinds of stories that we put priority on, explaining, rather than just talking about the back and forth in national politics. We want to figure out, what does this mean for people who live in Alabama? What does this mean for our state? And how might it come to affect you or your pocketbook or how you live your daily life? That's really how we see our role in covering national politics for Alabama.
You mentioned sports a while ago. This sports investigative work I found pretty interesting. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this is truly, Ike. This may be one of my favorite things on this list for a couple reasons. It's very simple investigative reporting. And this work here by sports reporter Matt Stahl, in my estimation, it did a couple things. It told us who Hugh Freeze is and helped us understand him and where things were at Auburn. So my fellow Auburn fans out there, you may remember that back over the summer, the football recruiting class, basically it seemed to be falling apart. Things weren't going well. And if you're somebody who lives on message boards and social media, you saw that people were popping off with a lot of gripes about how much time Coach Freeze was spending on the golf course. So in late June, our good buddy Matt, he dug into the numbers and found that Hugh Freeze was in fact the most prolific golfer among all of the coaches in the Southeastern Conference. And Coach, now he was quite proud of his golfing prowess, and he posted his scores onto the U.S. Golf Association's database.
You leave a paper trail that way.
So true. And this work, it drove the conversation around Hugh Freeze and Auburn at media days. It had other coaches, and in some instances, making jokes. It drew comments from Greg Sankey, the conference commissioner. The Auburn brass, they weren't too wild about this reporting, but they and Hugh Freeze both had to face questions and answer the tough questions about his golfing. And I think this should tell you, national media, even Golf Digest, cited Matt Stahl's reporting for AL.com. And one of my favorite pieces of impact here was he stopped posting his golf score.
Now that's real impact right there.
Now, y'all want to talk about letting people make up their minds for themselves. I'll let y'all decide if you think Auburn had a good football season or not, listeners. And as a fan, I have my thoughts, but as a good editor and journalist, I'll keep them to myself here.
Yes. That is the drawback, by the way, to working in sports, especially as an editor type, is it becomes you look at them with a whole different perspective, and maybe some of the fun's gone out. I don't know. I want to mention on this one how important college football is, because folks will completely forgive a president if it's their guy for playing a lot of golf, right? We saw it with, Democrats up in Trump plays too much golf. Well, Republicans, Obama played too much golf. And then you had Bush, who played a lot. And then he for optics, he said, I'm a wartime president. I'm not going to do this. But no matter where you are on that, people want their college football coach to be sleeping on a cot in his office. There's no time for 18 holes.
Well, and I'll tell you, I think that's true, but I suppose if you're winning, you can play as much golf as you want,
Yes, it absolutely goes back to that. I remember days of working for the paper in Tallahassee, and when Coach Bowden got a lifetime contract, he said, "Yeah, wait till I'm 6-5, then we'll see if it's a lifetime contract." A lot hinges on that record.
Very, very true.
Tell me about Roy Johnson's columns that you pointed out on some stuff he shared with the public.
Yeah. So over the summer, Roy Johnson, he's one of our columnists here at AL.com. He made what I certainly believe is a very brave decision to publicly share that he had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. And Roy decided to write a series of columns for AL.com. And the response that we saw from that was so very moving. Roy heard from men all across Alabama and really across the nation who chose to share their stories with him of surviving cancer or living with cancer. And one of the things that really stood out to me on this was that he heard from men who said they were inspired to get tested, as well as from women who said they were encouraging the men in their lives to get checked. And I remember one email that Roy shared with me. There was a woman who wrote to him and said that her husband would be getting tested, and that it was because of Roy's columns and his decision to share this really difficult news that he had received. And, Roy also, he called on lawmakers in Alabama to do something here in 2026 coming up that they failed to do during the last legislative session. And that's make prostate cancer testing free for men in our state who are at the highest risk. The lawmaker who sponsored that bill last year has already pre-filed it for the upcoming session. And I just think it's worth noting that, the test for prostate cancer, if you are diagnosed with prostate cancer early, it can save your life. Prostate cancer is very treatable. the key is that early detection. And to me, that's just been a huge piece of impact from Roy's decision here to share this and to write about his experience, is that it is encouraging other people to take that step and go get that test.
Definitely one of the most important things to people personally. You want to talk about local. Well, what's going on in your body is pretty dang local. And in Alabama, we have a lot of folks across demographics, by the way, who are doctor's office averse. I get it. I have white coat syndrome myself. They think I have high blood pressure every time I'm in there. And I say, no, y'all just terrify me. But yeah, super important stuff, and a life-saving series of columns.
And if I could just say too, like this one means a lot to me because I'm really fortunate to get to edit Roy, and I just really respect the heck out of him for sharing this and for handling this the way that he has. And gosh, I just respect and look up to him so much for that decision. And Roy's doing well. Roy's doing well. He's working with his doctors and he's sharing his updates in his columns. So hope that listeners will follow that and send Roy well wishes. And if you're somebody who, is at high risk or needs to get tested, certainly hope that you'll consider that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Best news of all that he's doing well. Savannah Trians-Fernandez on the Beds for Kids program.
Yeah, I love this one. This is really just an example of the kind of impact that we see all the time throughout the year here at AL.com. Savannah wrote about a program in the Black Belt to raise money to buy beds for students who did not have a safe or comfortable place to sleep at night. And this program started off with hopes to raise about $25,000 to be able to buy bed frames, mattresses, and sheets for about 70 students in the Sumter County school system. But within hours of Savannah's story going live, donations had already started to pour in. The superintendent reached out to her to say thank you for doing the article. And in the end, thanks to generous donations in the community, they raised more than $35,000 and are able to help more than 150 students make sure that they have a nice bed to sleep in at night. And I think having a bed to sleep in is something that most of us would take for granted. Mm-hmm. And so I thought this was just truly, truly fantastic impact.
Yeah, a huge impact for these kids. Also for our perspective, because like you said, you take it for granted. You don't think about it, and you don't have to be some super rich, crazy elite guy to take it for granted. You can be average working class, and you don't realize what some people are doing without. Outstanding work.
Absolutely, and just to kind of point out, we chose this story from Savannah to feature here in this list, but we saw surges in donations as we covered other issues. You mentioned earlier, we were talking about the federal funding. Mm-hmm. When we covered the pause on SNAP payments, we heard from organizations that, they got more donations to help, people have food. We heard from another organization. This was actually also one that Savannah wrote about that helps young people out of homelessness. Our coverage specifically led to them getting financial support. So these are the kinds of things that we see throughout the year. This is just one really clear example of how that works.
Yeah. Joseph D. Bryant, reporter, was on this show. This actually might have been in 24 because he's been covering he had covered the Tarrant crazy local politics scene for so long. Tell me about the arrest that was dismissed because of some reporting.
So in April, Joseph wrote about the arrest of this guy. I call him sort of a town critic, somebody who likes to speak his mind about what's going on with the town's government and leadership. He's been very outspoken about, the police in the town and what he thinks about the job they're doing. And this guy was arrested on what his lawyer essentially said was a totally trumped up charge. He was accused of defaming the police on Facebook and arrested for that. And one day after Joseph's story, this arrest was dropped. This was almost immediate. And the thing about this one that's quite interesting is something very similar happened last year when Joseph wrote about the arrest of another town critic. That one was an elderly woman. And then after his story, she was found not guilty in court and did not face jail time because of Joseph's reporting and just exposing what had happened in her case.
We try to use the First Amendment probably, or the freedom of speech, probably even way beyond what it was intended for. This is exactly what it's intended for. So good for Joseph.
Yes, Joseph loves to keep the government honest.
Yes, and he is, he is right now 2 doors down from me in this room doing that very thing. So y'all look for his next byline. The impact that we see off some of these stories, sometimes the story publishes and everybody donates money for beds. Sometimes it kind of takes a while. You want to tell me about the parking bandits?
That's absolutely right. This is actually still for us. I mean, this is sort of a live story. We're still waiting to see what the impact of this one might be. But reporter Megan Plotka up in Huntsville, Megan dug in and found out that there was a private company that had been hired to police those lots. And that private company actually employed gig workers who would get paid $5 for each ticket that they wrote.
Ooh.
And Megan reached out to city officials, and she talked to one councilman that said the scheme that the private company was running was essentially tantamount to entrapment, as he noted that they might use misleading signs to trick people into believing they could park in those lots for free. And then one of the gig workers could show up and write a $35 parking ticket. Just one day after her story ran, this councilman said that he had the city attorney's office working with him, and they were drafting a resolution for the city council so that they could vote on, cracking down on predatory ticketing. Now, as of now, we're still waiting for that resolution to be voted on by the city council and see what happens. So we'll need listeners to stay tuned. But this was just a fantastic example of local investigative reporting.
Well, we'll see where the case goes, where the story goes. I don't want to take a side or anything, but if you were to pay me $5 a ticket, I would have carpal tunnel writing tickets. That seems a little twisted.
I think the people of Huntsville who have gotten these tickets might agree with you, Ike.
All right. Now here's another one that we've had the reporter on here before, Ivana Harinkyu, talking about this exact topic, and this reporting started last year, and then some of the resolutions came into this year. You want to tell me about the parole board?
I'm sure your listeners have heard from Ivana and will remember that she spent all of last year digging into the bottleneck at the parole board in the state. She found that the parole rate in Alabama had fallen dramatically after Lee Gwathney, who was a former state prosecutor, took over as the chair of the board. Gwathney was the most frequent no vote on the 3-member board and argued to keep more people locked in Alabama's deadly prisons. After all of Ivana's work, Gwathney came under questioning from lawmakers and other leaders in the state on both sides of the aisle. She did still have the support of at least one major player in state politics, though, and that was Attorney General Steve Marshall. Mm-hmm. And that's what made it even more notable that Governor Kay Ivey in July decided to oust Gwathney from the parole board. Yep. Marshall had asked the governor to reappoint her, saying that the attacks on her were unprecedented and unwarranted criticism by, in his words, the liberal media. But the governor decided to replace Gwathney anyway. And this was all a direct response, or this was all a direct result of all the great work that Ivana did in 2024.
I've mentioned in this story before, and I don't think I've articulated it well, and I haven't really planned this, so I probably won't here either. But this is one of those cases for me. You always hear, well, don't just give anecdotal evidence. We need to see more cumulative numbers. And there were she did stories that showed what the goals were for parole rates and where we were and how far we had fallen. But in this case, those anecdotal stories that she did along the way to support some of the reporting um, seem to have more of an effect in my mind. So if anybody's saying, well, you do the crime, you pay the time, absolutely. Go read some of the instances that we have people that have missed out on parole and the way they were sentenced at based on kind of the politics of the time, and you can see that why people were a little, hey, why it was a bipartisan reaction to say, hey, isn't this a bit much?
Yeah, if I could just, add to that too, I totally take the point, people may say, this is one example. I mean, to be honest with you, Ike, there were so many examples. The number of examples were overwhelming. This was not a matter of we cherry picked a few, crazy cases. I think that's part of what really made this reporting so impactful was that the examples just kept coming. They just kept coming. And I think that, as, people, in power, I think as lawmakers and other officials looked at this, I think they could see that this was not a matter of, oh, we just went and picked out this one really crazy case. There were just so many different ones that could have been highlighted.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And to stay on crime and punishment, more Ivana with our actually we're counting them down. This is two, and we got one next. I didn't do it that way. I could have been more dramatic all along. Number two, Ivana Harinkyu again with. Go ahead.
This one's actually number 3, Ike.
Oh my gosh! What?
Yeah, this one is the no trial. That's number 3.
Oh, okay. All right. Go give us number 3 then. This is why I didn't count, right?
We'd get going and we'd forget to count.
Right.
Yeah. So this is another one from Ivana Harinkyu. There's a man named Christopher Barber who he's now been on death row in Alabama for 3 decades. He's there for being convicted for the rape and murder of a single mom in Montgomery. But a few years ago, Alabama finally agreed to test the DNA that was found at the scene, and it actually came back positive for another man, not Christopher Barber. Mm-hmm. The man that it matched is a man who used to live next door to the victim. He's a man that already resides in an Alabama prison, and he is a man who is now serving life in prison for a different rape and murder in North Alabama. But that kind of thing, the DNA matching a known murderer, that didn't slow Alabama down. They pressed to execute Barber anyway. So Ivana tore into this case, and she showed how Alabama was now arguing that the convicted killer who left the DNA maybe had sex with the victim earlier in the day. The state said maybe Barber just didn't leave behind any DNA when he raped her later. Ivana essentially took this logic, compared it and their use of scientific evidence, and she compared that to another appeal where Alabama argued the exact opposite. And essentially what she did here is she just kind of laid out how, I believe the judge, the word that she used was that the state's theory of this case, that it just defies logic, that you would have the DNA that matches someone else and still be pressing to execute this man who the DNA doesn't match. And so the federal judge in this appeal, she was already skeptical, but in August, just after Ivana published a deep dive on this case, the judge made it official. Barber must get a new trial. This is not something that happens in Alabama. This is quite rare occurrence. And on this one, we're still waiting to see when this new trial could come. Ivana is covering this case as the Attorney General's office is actually still, despite this order from the judge, pressing to move forward with this execution for the man whose DNA does not match.
Mm-hmm. And when you said doesn't happen much in Alabama, you're talking about the retrial being ordered.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Here's a question. Can we go to number 2 now?
We can go to number 2 now, Ike. And guess what? This is yet another one that's from Ivana Harinkyu.
What did she do with all her time this year? Come on, Ivana.
Well, in this case, Ivana helped save a man's life, literally. This is another example, too, of impact that doesn't happen in the same calendar year where a story is done.
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, Ivana was the lone reporter who took the time to examine the case of Rocky Myers. He was a developmentally delayed man who was charged long, long ago in the fatal stabbing of his neighbor in Decatur. Ivana retraced the crime. She tracked down old witnesses. She examined the police investigative files. And as a result of all that meticulous reporting, there were numerous questions that were raised about the case, from Rocky's mental ability to carry out and hide such a crime, to the fact that the witnesses, including the dying woman, knew Rocky and never identified him as the killer. Ivana also, she found a witness who, after the trial, said she was threatened with jail time and coerced by the police into identifying Rocky as the person who was responsible.
Oh.
It's also worth noting there was no physical evidence in this case, and Ivana actually spoke to one of the people who served on the jury, and this jury had said that she wanted to find him not guilty,
Mm-hmm.
but that essentially there was some sort of deal making back in the jury room, and so this juror said she voted to sentence Rocky to life without parole in order to spare him from getting the death penalty.
Right.
But little did the jurors know that Alabama had this antiquated, I guess you would say, law that allowed judges to override what the jury recommended and instead say that Rocky would be executed. And so from there, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I'll interject and then you can continue. You always have to be skeptical of old time laws that put way too much power in one official's hands.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that's no longer the law. Alabama since then has actually outlawed, judges being able to override juries on the, what used to be called a recommendation for whether someone would get life in prison or if they would get the death penalty.
Mm-hmm.
And so after the story comes out, it really started a long and slow process of questioning the verdict. Ivana's work on the Denied series on paroles that we just talked about, it really earned her a lot of deep connections within, the state prison system and with state officials. And when it came time for his case to be reviewed, for Rocky's case to be reviewed, Ivana was one of the people that was consulted about what she had learned and about the evidence from decades ago. And then in February of this year, in a move that was completely unprecedented, Governor Kay Ivey commuted Rocky's death sentence. Instead, he will serve life in prison without the possibility of parole. He'll never be able to get out, but the state will not execute Rocky.
All right. Well, that's a lot. Thanks, Ivana, for staying busy and all the other folks on the list. I'm not going to do a drum roll, but we are at our last story that we'll share with you today. Let me stop here and say there lots of other things, a lot of things. Stories made a difference. Just reporters pounding the beat and just covering an issue over and over and over again. But some of these again are some of the big things that made a difference to folks in 2025. Well, Ashley, tell me, the last story is one that I believe, if I recall, ended up having bipartisan support. Everybody seemed to be on the same side. It just needed to be there just needed to be a story out there, apparently.
Absolutely. And this is one where, we've talked about how sometimes it takes a long time to see impact from stories. Mm-hmm. This one is the exact opposite of that. The timeline is really just stunning how fast all this took place. So back in January, there was a mom from Jefferson County who went on social media to say that she was harassed when she showed up for jury duty with her baby, who she was breastfeeding. And we ended up hearing from several moms who said they were harassed or threatened with DHR for bringing their breastfeeding babies to the courthouse when they got called for jury duty. So reporter Heather Gann, one of our breaking news reporters here at AL.com, she wrote about the issue, and the impact was just absolutely just immediate and decisive. Heather's initial story came out on January 15th. by January 16th, a lawmaker had announced a bill to exempt nursing mothers from having to serve jury duty. On January 18th, so just a couple days after that, the Alabama Supreme Court issued an order citing those incidents that happened in Jefferson County and saying that nursing mothers are excused from jury duty. And then, of course, the bill that lawmaker had announced, it took its time, wound its way through the legislature. But as of October 1st, nursing mothers in Alabama need only provide a doctor's note to be exempt from jury duty.
That's quick in the world of state government. If I recall right, the harassment also came in the form of pressure from the bench, from judges.
That was what the accounts were. Yes, that the judges were among those who were basically just giving them trouble about showing up at jury duty, their civic duty, and bringing their babies with them.
Yeah.
And, these were moms who said, like, their babies don't eat any other way, right? Like that's literally how their babies eat, was through breastfeeding. And so they couldn't just leave them at home for, 8 hours or however long you find yourself, down at the good old courthouse. They had to bring their children with them. And they just felt like they weren't extended really any grace or understanding about their situation, even though they took the time out of their day to show up and do their civic duty and show up to serve on a jury.
Yeah. Wow. Well, 10 stories or series of stories that made a difference in 2025 right here in Alabama. Ashley Rimkus, one thing I often ask folks, anything we can look for that's coming out in the next week, month, early next year?
We'll have some really good stuff coming out early in 2026. I don't want to spoil anything or
Nobody's
give anything
listening.
Away right now.
Nobody's listening.
But we do. We really hope that all the listeners will. What is it you say? Come see us on the internet at al.com.
Come see us.
Yeah, we'd love that. And, I also think it's important too. If you don't mind, I'd like to just say, to all the listeners out there, whether you're a subscriber or not, we appreciate all the support to al.com. And, if you're considering that, or if you already are a subscriber, thank you. But if you're considering that, really, this is the kind of work that subscriptions and the support that we get from our readers, it really helps us to do this kind of work.
Yeah. Journalists are professionals and they cost money, and we're in the business of hiring them. So that's how we get out there and get it done. And I'm so appreciative of all the folks who subscribe or just support one way or the other. And then these reporters do this work that I'm able to just use for this podcast.
Well, and Lord knows we're thankful for it, Ike.
Try to stay warm out there. I think it is actually going to warm up for Christmas week. The 1 week we won't snow, but it's been in your neck of the woods. Has it been pretty bone chilling?
It's been pretty bad. I got to tell you, when I woke up the other morning and it was 15 degrees, I knew how cold it was when my cat, Samuel P. Seaborn, is his name, when he had his breakfast and scurried back into bed and hid under the blankets because of how cold it was outside. So I knew it was freezing at that point.
Yeah, when they don't even want to be let out and then right back in, that things are going bad. We are Southerners, folks, so cut us some slack. Ashley, thanks so much for coming on and doing this.
Thanks, Ike. I appreciate it. It's been great to be here.
Everybody out there, y'all have a great weekend. And if things go according to plan, this is Christmas weekend. We will be back here bright and early Monday morning. We're not taking time off down in Alabama. Until Monday, though, y'all come by and see us anytime you want to. We're on the World Wide Web at al.com.